If I didn't think the federal courts controlled by the MAGA Republicans could outrage me even more, well, I was wrong. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So I nearly fell off my chair yesterday when I read the news that the Federal Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, based in New Orleans, had blocked President Biden's vaccine mandate with a temporary restraining order. Now, it's worth noting, by the way, that this is the exact same court that refused to block the Texas abortion law from going into effect. And in fact, after a Texas district court had put a restraining order in place with a very nuanced opinion, I'll post a link to that video over here, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals actually reversed the lower court judge's ruling and allowed the abortion law to go into effect. Well, restraining orders are granted by courts when they believe, number one, that the plaintiff has a good chance of succeeding, and number two, that there's going to be irreparable harm that will come to the plaintiff if they don't grant some type of restraining order. Well, on the one hand, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which of course is dominated by Republicans, seems to believe that a woman having to carry a child to term after she was raped is not the kind of harm that is irreparable. And number two, that requiring people to get vaccines to help get a pandemic under control is something that's irreparable harm. It really shows you where their priorities are. And the truth of the matter is, if you had any doubt that our courts have become nothing more than political bodies taking ideological positions, well, I don't know what will. The reality is that President Biden's vaccine mandate is, number one, overwhelmingly popular. Number two, it's probably singularly responsible for helping our economy bounce back. And as we continue to essentially require people to get vaccinated, this is what will finally kind of bring the virus under control. In fact, it makes you wonder if the Republicans even want to get the pandemic under control, because if they don't, then it just gives them one more thing to give President Biden a hard time about. So I would argue, as I have argued in a video that I'll post a link to here, that in fact the Republicans don't want to get the virus under control, and they're doing everything they can to keep the pandemic going. As the data have shown very clearly, the biggest thing we can do to get our economy back on track and to get our lives back to normal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And what's more, despite the fact that there's a lot of complaining and a lot of whining about having to get the vaccine, when push comes to shove, the overwhelming majority, 98 to 99% of people will get the vaccine when required to. Finally, as one law firm posted on their blog, which I'll post a link to down below, the authority for President Biden through the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, to move forward with this mandate is clear. The law authorizing OSHA specifically says that the Secretary of Labor can promulgate what's called an emergency temporary standard, essentially an emergency rule, through which OSHA can act to protect employees from, quote, grave danger from exposure to substances or agents determined to be toxic or physically harmful, or from new hazards, and that such emergency action is necessary, quote, to protect employees from such danger. As a result, as long as the administration makes it clear that this rule is temporary, number one, number two, that it's put in place under emergency circumstances to address a crisis, and number three, that the standard will help protect other employees from exposure to this danger, well then issuing such a standard is totally within the power of the Secretary of Labor. And the Secretary of Labor, as we know, works for the President. As a result, faced with action by President Biden that's popular, necessary to protect the economy and America as a whole, and authorized by statute, it makes you wonder why the Fifth Circuit felt the need to put a stay on this, especially given the fact that it's hard to believe that there is some irreparable injury that will come as a result of this standard going into effect, especially when they didn't think there was going to be irreparable injury coming into effect to the women affected by the Texas abortion ban. No, what's clear is this is about politics. The Fifth Circuit is simply standing up for the ideological politics of MAGA Republicans, and they're seeking to throw barriers in the way of President Biden in his efforts to try to get control of the pandemic and return America back to normalcy. The great fear of the Republicans is that President Biden will succeed, as he appears to be doing, by the way. With Americans tiring of the virus and the challenges that it has placed before us, if President Biden really is able to return us to normalcy, that'll be a huge victory that could lead to Democratic victories in 2022 and the president's reelection in 2024. I'm reminded of President Reagan when he came into office and spent the first 3 years of his administration dealing with a terrible recession, one of the worst recessions in our history. And yet, because of the fact that the economy was recovering by the time he was up for re-election, he was able to put up videos talking about mourning in America and was re-elected by a historic margin. Well, that kind of recovery under the leadership of President Biden is exactly what Republicans are afraid of. And so they're using the courts that they have stacked in their favor to try to accomplish that. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, or if you have any questions about that, I'd love to see your comments down below. And I'll link over here, by the way, to another video that talks about just how political the courts, in particular the Supreme Court, have become. And if you could leave me a like and subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.